Whew, man, yeah, we're getting into this. What's up, guys? This is John. So, this Uprising event has been mad fun, and I know after playing through the normal round a few times, I was already itching to try out the legendary mode. I got a little ahead of myself. Yeah, it turns out it's really, really hard. Like, the hardest difficulty of the Junkenstein event looks like child's play compared to this. I could not believe how difficult it was. I lost so many times. So many times. It's pretty sad. In fact, the gameplay that you're gonna see for a lot of this is actually the third hardest mode because I haven't had enough time to grind out legendary mode, but I know how to beat it. It's just about actually getting through it and defeating the mode. So before you get into a singles queue, first of all, just know because this mode is so stupid difficult, it's hard even with a pre-organized group of friends. And it's nearly impossible with randoms unless you just so happen to fall into a really coordinated team that everyone uses their mic and everyone knows their hero really well. Okay, so first of all, it's deciding whether or not you're gonna take on Legendary in the normal Uprising mode with preset Tracer, Reinhardt, Torbjorn, and Mercy, or if you just wanna be able to create your own team composition in the other Uprising option. Honestly, I would suggest the open hero Uprising game mode because let's be real, Tracer is really squishy at 150 HP, and for every round I've played so far, Tracer has always been the first hero to fall. Mostly because she gets caught out so easily, but a lot of it just has to do with her small amount of health and the fact that every single damn Omnic in this game mode is an aimbot on Legendary, I swear. Honestly, I would suggest keeping Mercy, Torbjorn, and Reinhardt for your team composition because they all have extremely helpful moves that can really turn the tide of the Omnic onslaught. Mercy's res is a huge deal since it can prevent the need to hold down R next to a down teammate, potentially causing your demise as well. Especially if there's like 2 or 3 down, you can res them at the same time. Not to mention her constant healing is a blessing. Torbjorn's turret is a no-brainer, just the constant damage to enemies is almost like having a 5th team member, just one that you gotta constantly be repairing. Oh, and his armor packs can really help alleviate the damage in the moment as well. Reinhardt could technically be switched out for Orisa, but what makes him extremely valuable is his charge ability, which we'll get into why it's so important in a little bit. Oh, and not to mention his shield has twice as much HP as Orisa's. Orisa's being 900 and Reinhardt's actually being a little bit more at 2000, so that makes a huge difference. And the fact that he can travel with it and Orisa's just goes where it's placed. So that comes with some difficulties as well if you're trying to move past a wave. But Tracer is honestly the real problem in the auto composition. Yeah, her ult is nice for taking out large chunks of enemies if you manage to cluster them all together, but she isn't as useful as a flanker in Legendary because these Omnics, like I said, are quite literally aimbots on Legendary, and they can take out a Tracer mid-blink, it feels like. So that's why I would suggest you go with another hero that can actually heal themselves, but also bring on the hurt. Roadhog would be good because not only is he a tank and he deals a lot of damage, but his self-healing and his hook ability, the ability to actually pull the bombs away from the payload right before they detonate, which we're gonna go into. Bastion is a great choice as well because of his self-heal and the huge barrage of bullets he can rain down in turret mode at any given point. Mei is also a pretty good choice since she has her wall, which she can use to ease the pain from at least one side of an Omnic push, as well as her self-heal and her ult, which can really help control a mess of Null Sector robots if it's getting a little out of hand. Her wall is also great for capping off attacks during the payload pushing phase just in case you get overwhelmed from behind or on the sides. I would also put a pin in Soldier 76 for his healing field capability, which not only allows him to heal himself but other teammates, and his high damage output from both his primary fire and his secondary fire, and D.Va as well, simply because her ult can really help exterminate a mass of the evil robots, but they don't have a lot of crowd control individually, so they do come second tier as far as what you should use instead of Tracer. Moving on to each objective, the first point is pretty straightforward. The only Omnics you're going to face are the Null Troopers during this section, so be persistent in taking them out one by one as they come through. Be sure to set up Torb's turret near the hacking terminal so that if your team gets pulled away at the entry to take on the heavier solo Omnics there, you can at least control the few that come in through the tunnel and make quick work of them when their health is already waning. Moving on to the second hacking terminal, this is where it gets a little dicey. You get your first introduction to the Eradicator, the tankier shielded version of the Null Trooper. These robots also shoot out 3 slow traveling balls of bullshit that hit you pretty hard, so try to avoid these at all cost. Once you clear out the handful of Omnics surrounding the terminal, go ahead and activate it to initiate the second part of the attack. You're gonna get hit with all sorts of robots from every direction as you go through the second phase, so staying alert and knowing where they're coming from is key here. At first, there will only be a handful of Omnics coming from the front or 1 or 2 from the left side of the point, so take them out quickly and get ready for the real fun. Once the second part begins, you're going to initially get hit with Omnics from the front and the right side, as well as one from the back that's just kind of trying to whittle you down. Taking out these outliers is what's going to ensure that you don't get overwhelmed from the front. And that's true for every part of this game mode. The longer you let 1 or 2 of the randoms survive, the less of a chance you have to push against the main line. Take out the Null Troopers from the surrounding area and leave the Eradicator in the back if you have to. The Null Troopers at the front are going to be more accurate and place more damage on your team if you focus on the Eradicator, so if need, have your Reinhardt shield against the Eradicator while the rest of your team is able to take down the Null Troopers from the front and the sides, then whittle down the Eradicator and take a second to regroup before moving on to the third point. Once you do decide to move on, you got your armor up, everyone's healed, and everything's good to go, you'll be greeted by a small wave of Null Sector forces at the front door, including an Eradicator with a bunch of the Null Troopers. Make quick work of them and move on to activate the third point. This is arguably easier than the second point, as you're in closer quarters, yeah, but you have more control and line of sight where the Omnics are coming from. Just be aware of the forces pushing in from the left and right side. They're gonna be a little bit heavier this time around, and it's easy to get overwhelmed. Oh, and there are a lot more Eradicators. I think there's 3, maybe 4 this round as well, so make sure your team doesn't get caught out by their balls of BS. Take out the smaller enemies as you can, and then focus on each Eradicator until you're able to clear them all out. After you cap this point, the next part of the game mode is what I think is by far the most difficult part of the entire brawl. You've got to sit on the payload for 3 waves of Omnic crap, and it gets really, really intense really fast. This is also going to be your first encounter with 3 new enemies. The tiny slicers, which fire lasers at the payload to attempt to blow it up, and are generally really powerful for their size. The creeping bombs, which slowly make their way to the payload and lay out massive damage, and the B-73-NS units, which is Bastion's Null Sector form. Before you encounter the first wave, you'll have a chance to set up for the onslaught, as everyone needs to get on the payload to actually activate it. So have your Torbjorn set up his turret either in the windowed area on the overpass or on the raised ledge behind the payload. It may also be worth going to the clear other side of the overpass and placing the turret in the window parallel to the payload, but the turret won't be able to hit anything on the left side of the payload, just so you're aware. Once you get everything set up, go ahead and initiate the sequence to get into the fight. The first wave will have the Null Troopers, Eradicators, and the Slicers. Try to take out the Slicers as quickly as possible, since their constant damage to the payload is going to be a big problem. If you have Bastion, have him set up either on the back ledge where the turret is, or on the payload itself to dish out some adequate damage to the Slicers that try to attack the payload. Since he has his self-heal, he can sustain himself for longer periods of time without having to break turret mode, so it could be useful just to clear out those little Omnics while the rest of your teammates are trying to control the other Omnic forces that are pushing. Once you clear this first wave, you'll get your first encounter with the bombs, the big, ominous, hovering beasts that slowly make their way to the payload with the intent to blow it up. This is where Reinhardt and Roadhog will shine. You can use Reinhardt's charge ability to charge the bomb away from the payload right as it starts to explode. And while the positioning is weird, Roadhog can use his hook to pull the bomb away from the payload as it's exploding as well. This means other teammates can focus on the smaller enemies without getting overburdened, and you don't have to waste any effort or time on trying to dismantle the bomb, which is a big mistake some of these teams have made, and I've made in a lot of these rounds. If you focus on taking out the high HP bomb, more and more enemies are just going to stack up on you. More Slicers are going to laser the payload, and you're not going to make it to wave 3. Which is a doozy, by the way. In this wave, you have to face a couple of Bastion units, which are just as big of dicks as in normal compositions. Any way that you can, find out how to disrupt their line of fire. They're just going to stay in turret mode and lay on the hurt, so use Roadhog's hook, Reinhardt's charge, basically anything and everything to diminish their chance to sit in turret mode while another teammate or another 2 of them takes them out, and it will do your team a lot of good. There will be, I think it's 2 more bombs during this phase, so take them out the same way and try to survive until the payload is finally ready. Once you get it done, you'll start phase 3.5 of the brawl, which is everyone's favorite task of escorting the payload to its destiny, blowing up a big metal door. Throughout escorting the payload, you'll be greeted by all sorts of Omnic forces from basically every direction. including more bombs to dilapidate and Bastion units that have, well, basically an infinite ult that they use to bombard the payload and your teammates. So again, try to disrupt them as you can and make quick work of them. Also, be aware of enemies from behind. They're going to be trying to take out the payload while you're distracted, the little slicers, from the front, and those slicers are determined to blow it up. Not to mention, this is where the bombs spawn as well, so have Reinhardt and Roadhog focus on taking them out right before they detonate, the same way you did in the first phase of the payload. After you get the payload to the wall, it'll take a few seconds to explode, so make sure you keep collateral damage to a low and take out any pursuing forces while it's ramping up and eventually explodes. After it blows up, the last part of the brawl starts, which is taking out the 3 OR-14-NS units in the facility, which are the Orisa units. While difficult, I still think initiating the payload is a lot harder. Right off the bat, you're going to be faced by the first OR-14 unit, so focus all of your effort to dwindling its life down. Keep in mind there's going to be a few turreted and tank Bastion units in this section as well, the first one being on the right hand side of the map at the turn. If you can, take him out as quickly as possible to make faster work of the OR-14 unit. After you push past them and finally take it down, an ulting Bastion and some Null Troopers will push on your position. There will be a turret mode Bastion up in one of the flanking positions as well, aiming straight down the corridor. So take him out from the guarded area on the right hand side right before the end of the map. There will be Null Troopers coming in from behind, so be sure to take them out so that you don't end up taking unnecessary damage and potentially costing a teammate or two from behind without knowing it. Once you clear out the 2 Bastion units, move on to take on the last 2 OR-14 units, which will be attacking you at the same time. There will also be the last turret Bastion on the left-hand side, just spraying you with bullets while you're trying to push. Use the same guarded flanking position on the right-hand side, once again to take him out before you push too hard, because having him attack your back while you take on the OR-14's unit is really, really tough. After you get him out of the picture, you'll just have the 2 OR-15 units left with some Null Troopers. So if you just want to avoid the potential damage, have your DPS and Torb take out the Null Troopers while your tank focuses on an OR-14 unit and Mercy heals everyone as best you can. By the time they're ready to jump in, it should be quick work to take down the first OR-14 unit, and the second one won't stand a chance without any reinforcements. Push against their shields and put everything you've got into your kit to displace the last menacing Omni. And after 17 million times of trying this over and over, you should have beat the legendary mode. Don't get discouraged, everyone is talking about how difficult this mode is, so if it takes a lot of time, you're not alone, believe me. I do hope that this guide helped you out. Did you already beat the game mode on Legendary? Let me know down in the comments. And please do subscribe to our channel to make sure you get the best guides for every Overwatch event in the future. You're watching esports on PvP Live.